ॐ मधुवाताऋताय दे मधुक्षरन्ति सिन्धवः माध्वीर्नः सन्तोषधीः मधुनक्तमुतोषसि मधुमत्पार्थिवगं रजः मधुद्यौरस्तु नः पिता मधुमान्नो वनस्पतिर्मधुमागम् अस्तु सूर्यः माध्वीर्गावो भवन्तु नः Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sweetly blow the winds, the streams scatter sweetness. May the ebbs bring us sweetness, the nights and dawns fill us with sweetness. The dust of the earth is full of sweetness. May heaven itself, like a father, bring us sweetness. The ancient forest trees are full of sweetness. May the sun itself shower sweetness on all of us. May sweetness flow towards us from all directions. So the subject before us is eternal values from the Vedas. We are going to deal with this topic in 2 sessions. Vedas are the oldest and the most profound document on the philosophy of existence known to mankind. It is the most fundamental canon in the cultural, philosophical and spiritual life of Hindu Vedantic tradition. The word Veda itself is derived from the Sanskrit root vid, which means to know, which indicates a vast body of sacred and esoteric knowledge concerning the spiritual and ethical truths realized by the sages in ancient times. So one of the definitions is Vidanti dharmadigam anena iti Veda. So Vedas constitute a body of scriptures from which we learn about dharma. Dharma in its most comprehensive, in its most profound sense, is something that preserves the eternal values of human life, which sustains humanity, which guides us, which helps us to live according to certain fundamental ethical and spiritual principles, which bring harmony and peace in society. There are, of course, other definitions. From a more philosophical perspective, Shankaracharya's definition is very well known. Atra rigvadi vedas tat pradipatyatham vicharam kurvantidi vedakhyam apnuyuhu athava sadbhavam sadhayantidi vedaha athava brahmadinam paramatmanam labhanta iti veda. This is Shankaracharya's own definition, which is given the Sanasujatiya Bhashya, according to which Vedas constitute a vast body of spiritual and philosophical literature from which we learn the highest spiritual truth, the true spiritual identity of all of us. Of course, there are many other definitions. So Vedas, in a way, can be said to be the source book of life as a whole, the ethical and moral values, the philosophical speculations, and certain central core values which are necessary for humanity to live in peace and harmony with nature. So that's what we are going to discuss in the coming sessions. Altogether, there are 4 Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. According to an ancient tradition, these four Vedas formed one single corpus, body of literature, spiritual literature. One great Vedic saint called Vyasa, he classified these Vedas into four sections and taught each section to one of his four disciples. So, Rigveda was taught to one of his disciples with the name Paila, Yajurveda was taught to Vaishambhayana, Samaveda was taught to Jaimini, and Atharva Veda was taught to Sumantu. This is an ancient tradition. And each of these Vedas has got subsections. Like Samhita, Brahmanam, Aranyakam, Upanishad, four sections. But we are today concerned with some of the core values that Vedas as a whole teach. That's our present topic. And this is common to all the four Vedas. The Rigveda constitutes the biggest and the most voluminous of the four Vedas, with close to 11,000 verses divided into more than 1,000 suktas, hymns, which contain many. Each of these hymns contains many verses. And the whole book is divided into 10 sections called the mandalas. This is one tradition of analyzing the Rigveda Samhita and other related scriptures. I'm not going to those details, which we already discussed on several other occasions on this platform earlier. Now, when you talk about the values from the Vedas, you'll find many of the fundamental values and practices and sacraments and belief systems that are common to Hindu, Buddhist, Jaina, Sikh, all these traditions, to most of the religious traditions which had their origin in the East, were influenced by the Vedic heritage. For example, the belief in multiple life cycles, multiple births, the doctrine of karma, the principle or doctrine of reincarnation, all these have their fundamental source in the Vedic literature. So, Vedas have influenced not only Hindu religion, but also most of the other religious traditions and cultural traditions which have flourished in the East for thousands of years. Now, something very interesting about Vedas is, it teaches us how to analyze our life, how to place before us some fundamental values. So the first subject to be discussed is the four Purusharthas, Chadurvidha Purushartha it is called. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. Dharma means the ethical, moral values, the guiding principles that should guide and direct and regulate our activities. For monks and also for the lay people. So the first and the most important value from the ordinary standpoint is dharma. Even those who are trying to acquire material comforts like artha, for fulfilling their desires with kama, will need to follow certain principles of dharma, certain ethical, moral principles. So dharma means the regulating ethical, moral principles. Artha means the means for fulfilling our desires, and karma means the normal ambitions and desires and goals, secular material goals of human life. Moksha is a transcendental value which takes us to a higher plane of thought and speculation. What's the meaning of human life? What is our ultimate destiny? What happens to us after death? So, these are the four values. We should remember that these values give equal importance to each and every one of them, because from the highest spiritual perspective, moksha or liberation, the value that refers to spiritual enlightenment may be the most important value. Still, we don't reach there unless we are convinced of the perishable nature, the limitations of material comforts. So when a person or when an individual pursues his or her goals in secular life, money, wealth, status, comforts, all these, when he pursues these material worldly values without deviating from the path of dharma, without deviating from the path of the sustaining, fundamental, regulating principle of ethics and morality, then naturally we'll come to a conclusion that there is something beyond the material comforts. The richest man is not necessarily the happiest person. The most powerful person is not necessarily the most contented person. So, artha, that is means for enjoying comforts, and fulfillment of comforts, desires, kama, though necessary and normal in human life situations, do not constitute the ultimate value. The ultimate value is something beyond this. That's a transcendental, ultimate spiritual value called moksha. So moksha here means going beyond worldly existence. Vedanta believes in the doctrine of karma and the doctrine of reincarnation. According to our actions, our thoughts, and our activities, we generate certain samskaras, certain tendencies, certain impressions. And with this, we migrate to the next life. So you are born again. But at some point, we come to a stage of spiritual progression when we want to come out of this cycle, the wheel of samsara, the wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth, according to samskaras and vasanas. According to our samskaras and tendencies, we are born again, and then we continue our life, and this continues in the next life. It goes on rotating as a wheel. It's called samsara chakram, vritti, samskara chakram. The wheel, the rotating wheel of samsara. In Buddhist tradition also, pratitya samutpada, the 12-link chain through which we migrate from life to life. In Buddhism, the same idea is taken as nirvana. That is only a Buddhist interpretation of moksha. So, the idea of moksha could be found in most of these Eastern traditions, though it could vary from tradition to tradition. So in Hinduism, The ultimate goal is eventually to go beyond this cycle of samsara, beyond this cycle of life and rebirth and discontinuing momentum. It is called moksha. When we reach that level of spiritual progression, we become one with the ultimate reality, Brahman or Atman. Then we are no more a part of this material existence. So these are the four values, really speaking. Now, you find in Hindu tradition something very unique, a unique mechanism to work out these values. And that mechanism is called Chadurasrama, the 4 stages of human life. Human life goes through 4 succeeding stages of evolution. Brahmacharyasrama, Garhasthya, that is Grihasthasrama, Vanasprastha and Sannyasa. Put in English language, the early period, the first period when you study, when you grow, when you get training, when you become trained properly to become a responsible citizen of the country, a responsible member of the family. And then after living the life of an householder, when you become aged, according to tradition, when a person sees the face of the grandson or granddaughter, the 3rd stage comes, Vanaprastha, retirement. The husband and wife, father and mother together retire to a lonely place, a solitary place, to spend the rest of their lifetime in scriptural studies, in scriptural instructions, and also in contemplation and higher thought. This is the 3rd stage. And the last stage is called the stage of mendicancy. Some of them will take to a life of renunciation, become mendicants, ascetics. It's a very interesting, a very scientific way of analyzing our life. So we all begin with studies. In fact, in the Yajurveda, in the Krishna Yajurveda, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a convocation address. Students going through the first of these 4 stages, called Brahmacharya Asrama, the stage of studies, studentship. After completion of their studies in the Vedic school, they are about to return home to start their life, to marry and become householders, playing different roles in the family structure, like father or mother, or brother or sister, different roles, and also how to become an ideal member of the family, an ideal member of society, an ideal citizen of the country, and so on. So there are instructions given how to be an ideal householder. The instruction begins Madhudevo Bhava, Pitudevo Bhava, Acharyadevo Bhava, Aditidevo Bhava. Maybe the first convocation address in the history of human civilization. It comes from Krishna Yajurveda, Taittiriya Upanishad. So the teacher instructs the students who have completed their Vedic education, who are about to return home to marry and become householders. The instruction begins, you should respect your father, your mother, and your teacher, and also your guest, somebody who comes, visits your home, with same reverence and respect with which you treat God himself. It's a metaphor, but what it means is, it's a duty of every householder to look after the parents And there are also long passages in various scriptures, including the Upanishads, which teach the parents how to bring up their children so that they will not deviate from the path of dharma. So it's a sacred duty of parents to look after the children properly so that children will grow up to be responsible citizens. And eventually when the parents get old, children should respect the parents, take care of the parents. So this sanctity of family relationship, this sanctity and sacredness of the institution of family is perhaps one of the most core values of worldly life, so to speak. Worldly life in the sense empirical life, social family life that you find in the Vedic tradition. This has influenced many other civilizations in Asia. So the sanctity and the sacredness of human relations within the family setting. So family relationship is not based on bloodline or blood relationship. It is a spiritual dimension. That's what Vedas teaches. The spiritual values brought into the context of family life. So it is said that those who complete their Vedic education, they should return to their homes, they should become householders, and they should live their life according to the principles of dharma, playing different roles of an ideal son or daughter, mother or father, husband and wife, and so on. And that will eventually take us to the third stage. So studentship, householdership, the third stage is the stage of retirement. It's called vanaprastha. So asrama here means stage in life. So it was believed that householders' responsibilities did not end with their children, their responsibilities with the children, to the children. It goes beyond the family setting. When they become old, father and mother, husband and wife should retire to a lonely place. It may be a temple. In ancient times, there were forest hermitages during the early Vedic age. So we are talking about roughly around 4000 BC. 2000 BC, that means India as it was 4000 or 4500 years old earlier, 4500 years ago. So we are talking about the early Vedic age, which was roughly around 2500 BC. So this tradition of family life was prevalent in India 4500 years ago, that is 2500 BC. So during the time when they spend the rest of their lifetime in the forest hermitages, they used to instruct other children from the neighborhoods on Vedic values. So you find in the Upanishads, in the Chandogya and Brihadaranyaka Upanishads, you find the names of many Vedic sages who are all retired householders. He used to live in forest hermitages, teaching the Vedas to children. This is an ancient tradition. That's how these Vedas were preserved for the last thousands of years. So according to one of the lawgivers who lived during Vedic times, Manu, there's a statement, Grihastasya yada pasyed vali palidam atmanaha apatyasya apatyam tada aranyam samasayet. The meaning is, an householder, any householder for that matter, who has already fulfilled his or her roles in family, when he or she sees the face of the grandson or granddaughter, and when the face is face shows indications of old age, wrinkled, and the face gets wrinkled, or when the hair becomes grey, these are indications of old age. Now it is time to retire. For the rest of the lifetime, they are supposed to retire to a forest hermitage and live in seclusion, in a solitary life, spending their time in meditation, contemplation, teaching the Vedas, teaching the principles of dharma to children in the neighborhoods. The fourth stage was sannyasa, mendicancy. Many of the greatest of India's spiritual teachers and philosophers were those who took to a life of mendicancy, like Shankaracharya, classic example, when they were very small, directly from the stage of studentship, without going through the intermediary stages of householdership and the retirement. So some of the greatest of India's ascetics, philosophers and epoch-making spiritual teachers directly took to a life of mendicancy when they were quite small, before, skipping the intermediary stages of marriage or householdership and so on. But that was the exception. At least it was not common. But the universal law was that every person, when he gets old, he should retire to a solitary place, should spend their time in meditation, in higher thoughts, and then eventually he or she can take to a life of total renunciation. So you can imagine this harmony. Studies, then the obligations of an householder, and the higher obligations towards the preservation of culture in society by teaching, by instructing students in the neighborhood, and then eventually progressing towards one's own liberation, moksha. So this was a unique system of social and family life in India. And Vedas were preserved thanks to the total dedication of these great men and women who spent their years for studies when they were young. Then they married and became ideal householders. And then they retired and spent the rest of their remaining years in meditation and contemplation, giving instruction to the new generation, and then eventually taking to a life of total renunciation. This is the common practice. As I mentioned earlier, anyone could have taken to a life of mendicancy, total asceticism, right from studentship. So, brahmacharyadva, grihadva, vanadva, yadahareva virajit, tadahareva pravrachet. Anyone can take to a life of renunciation from any of the stages, the three stages of life. That was the principle. Now, another important, interesting aspect of Vedic, culture life during Vedic times was that, the flexible system of spiritual evolution. So according to your temperaments, according to your tendencies, even within one family, brothers and sisters could take to whatever line of life they preferred. So called Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. These are the four preoccupations. It's kind of division of labor. Say in the same family, if one person wants to become a priest, or he wants to become an ascetic, or he wants to spend his whole life in contemplation, in meditation, in the study of philosophy, study of higher speculation, mysticism, and so on. It was possible for any person in the family to take to that life. Such persons were called Brahmanas. So you can find the same family. If another person wants to become an administrator, he would be called a Kshatriya. If another brother or sister wants to take to trade, he would be called a Vaishya. If a fourth one wants to skip all these, not interested in studies or meditation or business or administration, but wants to spend his time in day-to-day routine activities, he will be called a Shudra. So this was a very flexible division of labor, which later corrupted into what we today find, that is casteism. So it is called, Chadurvarnyam it is called, the four varnas, the four preoccupations based on the temperaments and tendencies, the inherent tendencies of the individual. So you can find this something very interesting. So that's why during the Vedic times, there were two predominant tendencies in society. That's what historians say, and that's what we find from the records of Vedic canonical literature. The contemplative way of life and the active way of life. It's called Nivritti and Pravritti. When Shankaracharya in his commentaries, especially in Gita Bhashya, he refers to this. Dividhohi Vedokto Dharmaka Pravritti Lakshana Nivritti Lakshanascha Jagatasthithi Karanam. What he says, Bhashyakara says in the Gita Bhashya, Ubodghata. The Vedic way of life, or rather the values of life during the Vedic times, can be broadly divided into two categories. The values for those who were essentially of a contemplative nature, and those who were of an active nature. So even today you find, in all civilizations, in all societies, you can find these contrasting temperaments. In the same family you find. Some of the members of the family may be interested in spending their time in contemplation, in meditation, in studies, in reading profound books, profound works. You can't say it is wrong to do that, everyone should work in the field. It is wrong to say that. Another person may be interested in joining the army or to become an administrator. Some others may be interested in starting a company, a business establishment. Perhaps some others may be interested in engaging routine activities. So these four temperaments were called four varnas, which were based on tendencies, one's own characteristics, one's own inborn tendencies and characteristics and aptitudes, which later became a rigid system based on birth. We are not concerned with that, of course. Now, these are certain fundamental values that influenced society during the Vedic times. Now, there were certain universal values which are of contemporary relevance. Of course, many of these values do have a contemporary relevance. For example, think of this concept of graceful retirement from active life. Why should we work till the end of our lifetime? After you have reached 60 years or beyond that, or 70 years. Why should a person be active in his office or in his company? He can enjoy life by immersing in studies, in contemplation, in higher thinking. Even if you do not believe in God, still, if you can spend your time in higher arts, literature, history, and so on, that is a much more creative and constructive way of spending time than working till the, till the time of death. So, profession or routine duty is not the end of human existence. We should think beyond routine duty, professional or professional obligations. That's why during the Vedic times, as I mentioned, when a grandfather or grandmother sees his or her granddaughter or grandson, he can be assured that the lineage will be preserved, the family is now safe. Now let us spend the rest of our lifetime in meditation, in reading scriptures, in reading philosophy, maybe making contribution to art, literature, and so on, or maybe serving church establishments, temples, or philanthropical institutions which serve society as a whole. That be one way of spending our time and energy for the good of others, for the good of society. Of course, Vedic culture gave a twist to this. Thereby we are acquiring, generating spiritual wealth. That's what they believed in. If you do service to society, after retirement, if you do some kind of active service to society, either by instructing Vedic values to the next generation, or by starting maybe a philanthropical institution to help others, or maybe spending the rest of your lifetime in reading, in contemplation, that is also one way of making a contribution to human civilization, a higher contribution. Instead of continuing the same job till one falls, that should not be our goal. So the concept of artful retirement, vanaprasthasama, this is a tremendous value and contemporary relevance. So you find many of these Vedic values of life have got a relevance that goes beyond the immediate cultural or geographical setting in which many of these teachings originated in India. Then there were certain other universal values like Satyam, Dharma, Rutam, etc. So Vedic civilization, Vedic society lived in close proximity with nature, in close harmony with nature. So nature has a rhythm. There is an interrelatedness. There is a connecting link between different things in nature. So, according to Vedic culture, if you disturb the existing rhythm, the existing harmony in nature, you are violating and you are bringing disharmony into nature, and you are actually doing a great disservice to human society. So if you cut down the trees, deforestation will be the result, and there will be no rains. That can lead to a change in climates. If you pollute waters, it can lead to serious problems in nature. The fish and other creatures living in water will die. And if you pollute air, that can again lead to catastrophe. So one should respect and live in harmony with nature. There's an ancient Vedic mantra here. Om Dev Shanti Rantariksham Shanti Prithvi Shanti Rapas Shanti Roshadhaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishve Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shanti Reva Shanti Sama Shanti Redhi. So you find it's called Panchashab Shanti mantra. What it says, let the heavens, the earth, the sky, the waters, the herbs, the trees, the mountains and valleys, let the whole universe be filled with peace and live in peace, undisturbed by anybody. So how do we allow the mountains and waters and rivers and air live in peace? By not disturbing their existing pristine nature, the pure nature. So let them all remain in peace, undisturbed, established in their pristine purity. That's a Vedic prayer. So this principle of interrelatedness and mutual harmony was called rhythm. This principle of unity and spiritual unity and oneness of existence, the inherent unity and interrelatedness as expounded in the scriptures, was called rhythm. And a person who practices truthfulness, satyam, and dharma, ethical values, will actually live in harmony with nature. So the whole existence was considered to be one unit, one spiritual unit. You cannot disturb the nature, your surroundings, and enjoy peace in your mind. Because there is an invisible connecting link between what we have within ourselves and what we have in our surroundings. That's why Dev Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti. Let there be peace in heavens, and let there be peace in intermediary regions, and then let there be peace in trees and mountains and valleys, if a Vanaspadaya Shanti, etc. you find. So, it is dharma, rather it is a fundamental ethical value to live in peace with nature. And this, in our everyday life, we practice as truthfulness. So, satyam, dharma and rhythm, there were certain core fundamental spiritual values that Vedic sages believed in. It's a very universal value that you find here. So in other words, this rita, literally it means the course of things. That's the literal meaning of rita. So rutam samshanta, Sayanacharya says, satyabhudam stotram stuvanta, etc. So let us praise the eternal law, the existing law of spiritual unity and oneness of existence. So, this cosmic order, the cosmic rhythm, cosmic balance should be kept intact, should be kept undisturbed. In fact, in one of the first suktas of Rigveda itself, addressed to the god Agni, he says, Hrutasya Ditivam Satyasya Dyotakam. Sayanacharya is a commentator on Rigveda mantras, you find. So anyone who lives in this world and wants to live, wants to enjoy and experience happiness and contentment and peace within his heart, his mind, should not disturb peace and harmony in nature. That's because there is a connecting link between these various entities because creation is one spiritual family. This underlying principle was again and again stressed and emphasized in Vedic mantras, you find. That's why in Vedic mantras, there is a gradual evolution in our concept of the highest reality called God. As we evolve, our understanding, our interpretation of the highest reality also evolves. A crude primitive man may believe that God lives in a marble structure, and if he goes to that building once a week or maybe every day, that person, that God will be happy. That is, in fact, Vedas do not say this is wrong, but Vedas only tell us that this is the kindergarten, that's all. We don't stop our education in the kindergarten, We should go beyond that. So, and again, those who believe that the beauty of nature is the beauty of God, there are those who equate nature with God. That also has a place in Vedic spiritual philosophy. It's called pantheism. Pantheism is one of the undercurrents of Rigveda Samhita. So you find throughout Rigveda Samhita, Imam Gange, Yamune, Saraswati, Purushniya, you find these Vedic mantras which mentioned rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, etc. Many of the rivers are still existing, Some of them, like Saraswati, has vanished, dried up, according to geologists. But other rivers are still flowing in India and also in Pakistani part of Punjab region. So you find there are prayers, there are Vedic mantras which show a strong pantheistic nature in the Vedas. Pantheism implies equating nature with God. The beauty, the grandeur, the majesty, and the mystery of nature evoked great worship and reverence among the Vedic seers. So that's how these pantheistic views developed during Vedic times. There is also polytheism. Polytheism implies, belief in different gods and goddesses. Behind every natural phenomena, there is a presiding deity, they believed. And sometimes in some of the Vedic mantras, you find pantheism, where they believe that inherent in many of the natural phenomena, there is a divine principle. It's a pantheism. Then there's also monotheistic tendencies. Belief in one supreme deity, one god or goddess who is supreme, who is the creator, the one who sustains this world and who is guiding and regulating our life. That belief also finds its place in Rigvedic tradition. So pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, henotheism, as that's a Max Muller's analysis, though not always accepted by Indian tradition scholars of Vedas, of course, but it has its own importance and relevance. So Max Muller sometimes believed that there are certain suktas, certain mantras where one deity is considered to be supreme, and another sutra, another Vedic mantras, another deity is considered to be supreme, and so on. And eventually you find monism, belief in one supreme transcendental reality. And eventually Advaita. So you find all these, the gradual evolution of concept of God or our understanding of the absolute reality in an ascending order, going higher and higher and higher, you find in the Vedic tradition, you find. But behind all these, there was the principle. And that principle was that humanity is one spiritual family. We cannot worship God in a temple and then hate human beings outside. Our worship of God in the temple should express as spiritual humanism, as love and compassion towards fellow beings, not only fellow human beings, but to the whole nature, a spiritual affinity with the whole nature. That was considered to be the natural characteristic of a spiritual person. It's a very grand universal concept. You don't find in the Vedic tradition, in the Vedic culture, the idea of a big temple or a big marble structure or elaborate puja and worship. You don't find. At least you don't find during the early Vedic age, which all developed later, though they had their roots in Vedic culture, no doubt about it. So, the uniqueness of Vedic culture was that it looked upon the whole creation as one spiritual family. Unity and oneness and spiritual affinity with everyone and everything around us was the most important value that guided Vedic way of life. We will continue this discussion next week. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishnarpanamastu.